it really felt like the end. There is no way that I'm going to move forward. There's no way I'm going to date again. There's no way I'm going to love again. There's no way, that's what I felt, but it's not the end.
You just lost your loved one. Now what? Welcome to the Grief and Life podcast, where we explore this new reality through grief-colored lenses. Openly, authentically, I'm your host, Nina Rodriguez. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome back to the Grief and Life podcast. How can we harness the power of creativity to help us navigate the loss of someone we love? Today, I'm joined by Charniah Wilson, affectionately known as Shaw. And in February of 2021, Shaw faced the sudden loss of her partner, Ken. She has since channeled the grief into creating Ghetto, a platform where she combines healing with humor to help others feel seen in their grief. Shaw's relatable videos on social media offer comfort and connection to those navigating loss, making her a standout voice in a sea of content. She's not just a content creator, she is a creative who's reshaping how we talk about grief. I'm honored to welcome her today to share her journey. Welcome to the Grief and Life podcast, Shaw.
Thank you so much. I love that. Not just a content creator, but a creator that shapes the way we talk about grief. I need to put that somewhere in a bio.
You could definitely, that is what you're doing. You're reshaping how we talk about it. I remember stumbling upon one of those doom scrolling days, and I'm stumbling upon your page, and next thing I know, I'm laughing, and I'm like, who is she? Like, what is this? And you
the
were
idea.
On point with what you were saying. Your description of grief, how you described the experience, was so true. And I said, yes, this is exactly what this is. So
Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing. Where are you joining us from? I'm in Miami right now. Whereabouts are you joining from?
I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. So that's where
Not too far.
Yeah, not far, but I grew up here, and then I went to school in Montgomery, and then I moved to Atlanta for about 7 years, and then I moved back here about 5 years ago to help take care of my aunt who was sick at the time, and she has since passed away about 2 years ago, about a year after Ken. So that's okay. That definitely deepened the grief conversation for me. So I kind of know different parts of it, and just trying to navigate it, all in the same realm has been interesting.
Interesting, probably the best word for this whole experience. So before we get into the story, what was your relationship with grief before Ken passed and before your life changed?
Honestly, it was pretty shallow. I've experienced loss several times. My aunt's husband, my uncle, because they raised me. And he passed when I was fairly young. I might have been about 9 or 10. At that age, I didn't, when you're that young, you don't understand it fully. So I knew he was gone, but then death wasn't, you still think he's going to come back at some point. So I didn't quite understand it then. I lost my great-grandmother, who I was close to. I lost my dad, whom I wasn't as close to because my aunt raised me. But I grieved more for my siblings during that time because they were much closer to him. So it was still different. My godfather, who also helped raise me, he passed in 16, I think. And that was probably one of the heavier times for me because my godfather was my right-hand guy. If I called him with an idea, he was like, do it. I was like, hey, I want to enroll in this school and get a master's. He was like, do it. Like, he was cheerleader number one. So that hit pretty hard. I think before Ken, the biggest fight with grief is I had a friend named Austin who passed right before my godfather, but Austin passed suddenly. And it was like he went into the hospital, and then the next day, it was the way I found out, which I know we'll probably go into that, but someone had posted on Facebook, oh my God, rest in heaven, Austin. And I was like, what do you mean? So I'm calling. And at this point, I'm in Atlanta. So I'm an hour ahead of everybody. And I'm calling like 5 a.m, which is 4 their time. So nobody's waking up. And so after about an hour, we had got confirmation that he had passed. And that was probably, that hit differently because that was the first time I experienced death where someone was my age. And it was like, so we can die? Like, at
Right.
this age?
Right.
So that was before Ken. And then, of course, when Ken died, because he and I were together, we were living together, we were making future plans. I grieved for what we had, but I more so grieved for what we didn't get to have. And I've written this down. Every grief scenario has just been a different dynamic of emotion that I have had to navigate. But with Ken, it was probably the first time I had lost someone that I interacted with every single day and was a part of every single part of my life. So it definitely made a big gaping hole that was very difficult to fill. So that's been my journey with grief so far, and not hoping for any more, but life is life.
Life is life. And right. It's like we just hope that was the absolute last thing we had to deal with. And yet we know that, life will life.
Life will life.
Thank you for making those distinctions. I ask because our relationship and understanding about grief shapes so much of our experience, or can shape so much of our experience. So I always like to know, where were you before this one big pivotal loss? And it sounds like you had experienced so many others, and yet each one was so different. So thank you for making that distinction.
Yes.
So before, Ken's passing, who was Shaw and who is she now? Who is she then and who is she now?
Wow. Let me tell you. You're pulling out the question. Okay.
No pressure.
It's hard. No pressure at all. It's hard. It's hard to remember. Sometimes, good old Facebook will remind you who you were 5, 6, 7, 10 when you were 19. They remind you of who you were.
Do you recognize her?
Yeah. Now, sometimes I look at the post because Ken and I started dating initially. I am very private. That's why Grief is Ghetto was such a surprise to me and everybody around me, because they were like, "Oh, you don't like to tell much." And I mean, there's still a lot I don't disclose. But when Ken and I started dating, I told him, like, I don't want the social media. Our friends can know, our family. We don't have to do social media. But he was so active on it. He was like, let's just. And so we ended up posting pictures and things, and it became a norm. Even though it wasn't something I really wanted at first, it became fun to do. And, people look forward to what we're going to post next about each other. There's no one word to describe Shaw pre-2021. I think we had both just moved back to Huntsville. See, we were long distance before. He lived in Tuscaloosa. I lived in Atlanta. And so we had just moved back home because he's from Huntsville as well. And we were navigating that, being in the same city. Then after a year or so, we moved in, so we were navigating that. We were navigating new jobs. We were just navigating. So, but I think in the midst of that journey, we were having fun doing it. Like, there was some bumps in the road. There were some things, we couldn't control, but we were having fun doing it. We were outside. We went places, festivals. We went to concerts, and we loved the concert. We went to concerts. We went out of town. We vacationed. We were social. We had a good time. Shaw now, I don't want to go. I don't want to go.
Something that changed, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely changed. I've always had a bit of social anxiety, but after Ken passed, a lot of things came to the surface for me, and that social anxiety was probably the number one thing. I
know about that.
Yeah, I try to avoid going most places where there are going to be a lot of people, because I will start to sweat. I start to get hot. And then I've noticed my panic attack triggers, like my feet will start to tingle, and then it'll shoot up through my body. And I'm like, okay, I gotta go. And it's nothing anyone's doing. Nobody's coming in the crowd, pushing me, jerk. It's just the fact that I feel surrounded. When Ken first passed, my friends would want to go out. My friends were and I praise them on every podcast, and I'm going to keep doing it, but they were whatever I wanted to do. If I didn't want to go, that was okay. They were like, we're going to stay home. But if they're like, well, let's try to get out a little. But I didn't want people to give me the sick puppy dog thing. Like,
right.
Are you okay? Like, I didn't want that. So I was like, please don't. Please. I don't want to go. Like, I don't want to deal with that today. Now, it's getting a little better. I will go places. Am I going to stay long? No. Am I going to stay the whole time? Nope. Am I going to ride with you? No, I'm going to drive. So when I need to leave, I have to go. So pre-Sha was way more social. But now I've outgrown that a bit. I kind of stay to myself. I stay with my friends. We hang out, and that's just okay for me. I've accepted it. At first, I'm like, I gotta stop doing this, but now it's like, well, what's wrong with it? I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I'm still getting. I feel like life is still life, and I'm still having fun. So, that definitely changed for me quite a bit. The biggest change that I've had was I used to be a neat freak, and Ken would drive me insane because he was so messy. I couldn't stand it. I would be picking up clothes, and if he got off an hour before me and the dishes weren't clean, I was like, so you just sat here for an hour? You didn't think to yourself, hey, maybe I should run some water on these dishes. Like you didn't do anything.
Right.
But after that, my house was a wreck. And not just for a few months, for years. Like I had a best friend come and she moved in while she was looking for a job, and thank God for her. She started cleaning, and I was like, is this what clean looks like? I was so used to living in not filth. I wasn't dirty, but just stuff was everywhere,
It's probably a reflection of how you were probably feeling at that moment too.
Absolutely. Like my brain is full of mess, so my house is full of mess. So that definitely changed a lot. I'm getting better with that as well. I have friends that help me with that. I'm getting better with that. But those are probably the biggest two things that have changed about me. And I definitely look at life, and I know everybody says this, but I definitely look at life in a manner that I didn't before. Before, when I would get a difficult client, I would just get so frazzled and so upset. And now it's like, okay, so, that can be screaming, and then I'm like, great. So did you want to go ahead and sign? Like, it's
right.
It's almost like they're screaming and there's just a wall here.
Right.
And not because I'm not emotional. It's just because this doesn't matter. Right. None of this matters. There are so many bigger issues going on. And then listen, my boyfriend has passed. My aunt, the lady that's raised me, has passed. You don't have to try real hard to hurt my feelings. It ain't, it's not easy. So that's definitely changed. I've gotten a lot tougher in these grief moments. So those are probably the biggest things that have changed about me.
No, I appreciate it because it's very real. A lot of people don't talk about how we fundamentally change personality-wise, our priorities, our values, all the things. And I see myself in that example as well. Like I was working in real estate before, and I had to stop because I was like, if I hear another person complain about a doorknob or wall color, I'm going to lose my mind.
Oh my God, yes.
Yes. So it's just like, okay, you know what? Like I just fundamentally don't care about the things that I used to care about, and I don't see life the same way. So I hear you. I completely hear you. It's very relatable, and it's something that I went through myself. So I completely get it. And I know that you used to be into like 90s music, and you've always had this beautiful creative spirit that still is a part of your work today. Has that remained, or is that also shifted for you as far as
a 90s girl? Like dance? No, dance and being a 90s girl never changed. And a lot of that is what got me through this, because I no longer coach. Last season was my last season. But when I was coaching dance, I contemplated after Ken passed leaving the team, because I was like, I can't fully do this because I don't have enough in me to do it. But when I went back to practice, because my best friend at the time was the band director, and he was like, just come, see how you feel. If you just fall apart, I understand. But then when I would go to practice, those kids would make me laugh so hard that I would almost walk out forgetting, what has happened. And so I was like, dance is a huge part of who I am, and not just, a part of their lives, but it's a big part of me. And 90s music, no, when I tell you, my friends and I have 90s nights, and not just any 90s night, and feel free to take this, but we play games. We'll go to YouTube and we'll play the alphabet game, and we'll say, hey, we're doing 90s R&B. You play a song that starts with A. Then the next person will play a 90s song that starts with B. We have a microphone that my friend Reggie demands that I bring to every gathering so that he can scream in it. Now the microphone has a speaker, but he insists on screaming in it when we're, singing and all that. And a lot of us have sang in choir, so we're singers, we're harmonizing, we have a good time. So no, that 90s music, the dancing, that huge part of my life. Yes, I'm still trying to figure out how to rework dance back in, because I used to have a class called Shaw Shakedown, where I did like a 90s workout. And I've had a few people like, okay, you're not coaching, so when Shaw Shakedown. And I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I will definitely probably get that back up and going. But oh no, it's amazing how that never changed. That was almost the outlet that I needed when I was just deep in my grief.
Beautiful. And first of all, it sounds like so much fun. And it sounds like your creativity and your passion for music and dance actually helps you navigate your own grief. Grief is so disorienting. So whatever remains that could be a point of stability is so, so helpful. So yeah, creativity is such an anchor in grief. And I absolutely love that. I love that that was part of your spirit. And in a way, let's get to Ken's story and how after his passing, his encouragement to pursue your creativity was actually a big driver behind what you do today. Say as much or as little as you want. I don't believe in re-traumatizing people into retelling their story. So just share what you're comfortable with and what life has been like since, in terms of how you've channeled your grief.
Oh, thank you. First off, thank you for saying that, because sometimes you'll go on interviews and they're like, so how did you die?
Okay, right. I've never understood that.
But
you don't see that here.
Yeah, it was so on that day. So the funny thing is, Ken had been going to a friend's house who had a podcast, still has a podcast, but he had been going there just as a guest to their podcast. And they were like, hey, we're thinking about maybe adding you to the group, because the podcast was pretty good. So that day he had gone, I think maybe the second or third time, and he sent me a text. A lot of things happened that day. So for one, I got a raise. And when I sent it to him, I said, hey, I got a raise. It's this much and then this much with my commission. What do you think? Should I negotiate it? And he was a numbers guy. He was like, no, that's solid. That's dope. When does it start? I was like, okay, it starts my next, pay period. He was like, that's dope. Proud of you. Look at you rolling in dough. And he sent me all the gifts with all the money. So then I would typically see him during lunch, but during lunch he went to work for a bit, and then he went to his friend's house, and he texted me and said, hey, great news. They want to add me to be a host on the podcast. I was like, let's go. That's awesome. Because Ken was he can debate with the best of them, okay? Because if you were coming to him, you needed facts. He wanted to be a lawyer, and boy, it would almost drive me and his family up a wall, because they'd be like, here you go, he's finna debate it. But I thought he was great for the podcast. So he had gotten selected. Awesome. Great things. And he was like, hey, I'm gonna hang around a bit. We're gonna have a few drinks, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. Just let me know if you need me to come get you. This was a Thursday. So I got home. Things were great. I'm talking to my friend on the phone, and he called and said, hey, do we have headache medicine? And I was like, yeah. And I said, well, what's wrong? Because he had never really complained about a headache before. And I was like, yeah, everything okay? He was like, yeah. He sounded very somber, but I just figured, if you have a blaring headache, that could be why. And I was thinking, like, he probably didn't eat, because he'll do that. He won't eat. And so I was like, yeah, you need me to drive? He was like, no, I'm on the way. Now, his friend lived about 7 minutes from me. So 30 minutes had passed, and I just thought, he's just talking. That's what he does. They probably went out to the car and struck up another conversation. No biggie. And then an hour had passed, and I was like, probably still talking. No big deal. Because there's been plenty of times he was like, on the way, and it's 2 hours later. He'd be like, my bad. We were talking. So I didn't think anything of it. And after the second hour, and I'm still on the phone with my friend, we're just chatting. After the second hour, I was like,
yeah, you start to get worried.
Yeah, I said, well, Tiffany, let me call you back, because Ken said he was on the way at 11, and it's almost 1 o'clock. So I sent like the sideways face. I was like, are you still on the way? He didn't respond. And so I was like, well, okay, still no big deal. I take a shower. I'm folding. I'm getting ready to get in the bed, and Jamie Foxx is playing. I'm watching Jamie Foxx. And then another hour passed, and I was like, And so I texted again. I was like, are you okay? Sometimes he would get sick and need to sit down. I was like, did you get sick? What's going on? And there's no response. And so then, you know how your brain starts to, it's like the lady in the meme with all the math problems. I was like,
trying to figure it all out. Yeah.
Okay.
But at this point, did you feel like something was really wrong, or you were just like, oh, that's strange?
So here's a backstory. There was one time where we were just texting, and I tried to call him, and he was like, let's text for right now because I'm at my cousin's house. His cousins helped raise him. He was like, I'm at my cousin's house. And we had just been texting back and forth. I'm doing my hair. It's all good. And then probably an hour later, he was like, hey. So yeah, remember I said I was at my cousin's house? I'm actually in the hospital. And so I literally stopped. I was doing my natural hair. And so I had curlers in, and I had one section with no curlers, and I just stopped. And then I went up to the hospital. And allegedly his cousin, she was like, oh yeah, because he was going to sit in here and just act like nothing was wrong. And I told him, hey, either you're going to call her or I am. So I was like, it's not uncommon for him to, if he's feeling bad, he might have just gone to the hospital. So, or he might have just stayed at his friend's house and tried to regroup. So I started making the plan. I was like, okay, well, let me call. And I called, the phone's not off. It's ringing. So I just call again, and I call again. And before I knew it, I had done this for about an hour and a half. So at this point, it's almost 4. All I would do was call. And as soon as it would go to voicemail, hang up, call again and call again and call again. Because I was thinking, okay, if he's in the hospital and God forbid he's unconscious, somebody will see me calling and they will pick up. Or if he had like a car accident or maybe slid off the road, somebody will see me calling, and that's what I was like, let me just keep calling.
Right.
So I said, okay, at 5 a.m., because I didn't want to alert anybody.
This was all night. Wow.
This was all night. I was like, at 5 a.m., if I don't hear anything, I'll text his cousin or call her. I didn't want to do that because if it's not serious, I don't want to scare her.
Right.
So I'm calling. 5 a.m. hits. And so then I text his cousin, hey, I haven't heard from Ken. He said he was coming home at 11. Is everything okay? Or is he with you? And she had not texted back. So then I said, okay, well, let me just throw on some clothes. I knew the main road where his friend lived. I was like, well, maybe I could just drive up there, and if something happened, because he also had sleep apnea. So I was like, if something happened and he maybe fell asleep, I can see the car. So I start putting on clothes. And once I'm putting on clothes, I can see, if you can see here, I used to sleep in this room. This is the office now. I have a motion sensor light and I see it go on. And I was like, oh. And so I run over there and I see a big truck and a car. And I was like, who is this? And then I see his cousins get out of the truck. And I was like, oh. In my brain, I was thinking he was going to get out behind them. Maybe something happened with the car. And so I turn the alarm off, open the door, and I see them and not him. And I remember sitting there for, I don't know how long, with grief, you never know. But time is non-existent. And so I said, what happened? Because I didn't see him. And his cousin, bless her heart, she was like, why don't we come in? And at that point, I already knew. And I remember saying, just say it. And his cousins behind him are just in tears. And I was like, I just need you to say it.
Yeah.
And she did. And I didn't immediately react. I just remember looking around the room and I was like, man, do people see the walls coming in? Like when you see that on TV, it doesn't seem real until it does. And that was the first time I had experienced that. In all the grief lessons I had, that was the first time I experienced the walls literally caving in. Like I felt like I was getting ready. I was like, I said, do they not see the walls closing here?
Like everything.
And I was like, do y'all not, is it just me? Y'all don't see that? And I remember them coming in and she was talking. I don't know what Kim was saying, but she was talking and I looked up and I looked back at her and I said, wait, what? Because I don't. And, she was like, please don't make me say it again. And I was like, oh God. And I remember from there, I don't know if I fell, at the moment, because they all kind of grabbed me and we all sat there for a while just crying. And I remember just saying, what happened? What happened? From there, it just, a lot of things are a blur.
Yeah. Blur kicks in.
Yeah, it was a blur. He had apparently tried to drive home and was not driving very safely. He was pulled over by an officer who recognized that something was wrong. He was pulled over initially because they thought maybe he had been drinking, but they recognized something was wrong with him. Apparently he had gone to the hospital where he collapsed. He had gone to the hospital. They tried to work on him for a little bit and nothing. The process to figure out who to call for him, because his life was a lot like mine. Like with my aunt raising me, his aunt raised him, his cousins helped raise him. Same with me.
Right.
The police and, we're trying to figure out who to call because his mom passed when he was 14. His dad lived out of state. So they were running the tags and apparently they called some random relative or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, and this had probably happened at like 2 a.m. Wow. They finally got a hold of his older cousin who got a hold of the family from there, and they told him. He called his sister, they called the family, and this part always is crazy to me. They were like, we can't call Sha. We got to go over there. That's amazing, for one.
That's so thoughtful.
Yes, because they didn't, he's their family. They didn't have to do that for me. But when Kim and her older brother said, hey, we're going to go over there, his other 2 cousins like, well, so are we. We're all going to go. And they came to my house at 5:30 in the morning to give me that news so I wouldn't be by myself. From there, again, adrenaline. We were like, okay, so Kim, you call his childhood friends. I'll call his college friends. And I was like, I'll call his college friends because a lot of the friends from college I went to high school with. So we knew the same circle of people. So they're calling, I'm calling the college friends, and it's awful. It was awful. In between that, I was like, I looked up and it was almost 7. And I was like, I'm supposed to be at work at 8. Should probably call my boss.
Should probably let them know I'm not going to
be there. And I felt so bad because my boss was out of town. He was on a family trip. And it was just me, my coworker, and my boss working at the time. So she and I were holding the fort down. And I was like, oh God, she's going to be by herself. I felt bad. And I called him and I was like, hey, I don't want to talk about this, but I have to say this. My boyfriend passed. And he was like, oh my God. I said, I don't want to talk about it. I just was letting you know I'm not going to be there. And he was like, okay. And he came back in town the next day and checked. So, I mean, I remember the sun coming up. Like as we were doing all this, the sun's coming up. I called my aunt to tell her. And this is also the height of COVID because it's February 2021. COVID started to get real bad. The end of 19, we got shut down in 20. So it's still pretty bad. And I had just had COVID in January of 2021. In my brain, I said, what if Ken got COVID from me? And what if that's what did it? So all these thoughts.
Yeah.
Social media starts running up rampant. Ken has an attorney friend that was like, what do you want me to say? I will make a formal statement. Very sweet of him. And it was beautiful. He made a statement. And I had called some of my friends. One, of course, my friend who's the band director. And I was like, hey, I'm just letting you know Ken passed. He was like, oh my God. And I could hear him like rebel. I was like, what are you doing? He was like, I'm leaving. And I said, what do you mean you're leaving? You teach kids. He was like, I'm gone. I'm on the way. Everybody left their job. Everybody left. And I couldn't believe that. I had a friend in Atlanta. She was like, okay, I'm going to drive down. I was like, no, don't drive down. She was like, girl, bye. Be there in a little bit. And everybody was here. Probably the end of the evening, his cousins had gone to prepare their house and everybody was here. And from there, the drinking started. We just were I was in and out.
The days. Yeah.
The days.
Very disorienting.
Yeah. And from there for the next 10 or 11 days, I can't tell you one day from the next. I remember, I don't even know if I slept. And some very sweet lady put this under my TikTok where I was like, I wouldn't dream. And she was like, probably because you weren't sleeping. You just were kind of passing out from exhaustion. That's not sleep. Or passing out from being drunk. So I would sleep for a few hours and then I would get up and then I cry and then I sleep and then I get up and then I cry. And I can confidently tell you the first 4 days I wore the same clothes. I didn't shower because I thought it was one day. And finally, my friends were like, hey, you got to get in the tub.
Right.
You got to get in the tub. And I was like, okay, but I have to keep the door open. And it sounds crazy, but sometimes when I would shower, I would keep the door open and Ken would stand in the door. We would still talk while I was in the shower. So I was like, I have to keep the door open. I can't close the door. And they were okay with that. So I finally showered. And during that time, still height of COVID, he always talked about his funeral. He never wanted a funeral service. He never wanted a viewing. He was like, nah, y'all just, turn up and cremate me. And we were like, we're going to have to do a viewing because that makes it real for some people. So we definitely had to do a viewing, but because of COVID, it wasn't like you could just go in at any time. People had to go in about 3 people at a time. And then it was a lot. And we ended up having an outside memorial, which was amazing. And I was like, I want this when I die. Please do this. My old high school had just been kind of torn down. So the parking lot was just empty. And my friends kicked in high gear. I had one of my friends was like, I'm going to secure that parking lot for you. I got speakers. I have a podium. I have a microphone. And my friends that went to church, they were like, oh, we can get some chairs from the church. I was like, okay. So it was amazing. We ended up getting the flowers from the viewing and we set it up so nice. And all we did was people came up and said funny stuff about Ken. It was great. It was awesome. So we said all the funny things. And I mean, from there, it was still a blur because what happened? And in the midst of that, we were getting my best friend that came from Atlanta. She stayed, thank God for her. She stayed for 2 weeks. And I always tell people, had she not stayed, I would have died. Like, I needed her to be there. And she was so great in everything she did. She grocery shopped. She did okay, well, we were in today. Let me lay out your stuff. Where's your stuff? You want me to help you with your hair? What you need me to do? She was awesome. She helped pick out his clothes. All of those things happened and he was cremated. I tell the story of the yellow socks on my Grief is Ghetto platform. But
I don't think I know that one. So if you don't mind sharing. Yeah, that's great.
Yellow socks. So neither of us had ever done a funeral where someone's been cremated. It's always been a burial. So we were not familiar with how cremation works. And again, COVID. So Ken's service was like a Sunday, but the cremation was not until that next day because they had to schedule them. His mother's favorite color was yellow. I was very, very adamant with the funeral director that I was not putting a suit on him because he didn't wear suits. I was like, this is ridiculous. And I'm not buying one. So we had a beautiful yellow polo, some really nice jeans on him. And we found this set of socks, pastel socks. It was purple, pink, like a real pretty pale blue and yellow. I was like, oh, the yellow would be great because for those who don't know, when you dress the dead, you dress them to their drawers. They're like, no, they have to have underwear on. Something I didn't know either. I had never been that close to a service. But she was like, no, because I guess it's burying them with dignity. So we had all that pulled out. Yellow socks. Gorgeous. We had these new boots he had never worn. I mean, he was awesome. Ken has this picture where he has a grill and a pinky ring on. He was by no means a rapper, but that picture's so funny. He has that pinky ring and he has his grill. And he was like, hey, if I get famous, use this as my album cover. And I wish I had bought the shirt in here because he also said, don't put him on a shirt. We used that picture to put on shirts with him. It was like, no, here's your album cover. We asked his cousin, hey, can we borrow your pinky ring? And he was like, no. And we were like, what? Why? And he was like, because he's being cremated. They're going to burn it up. We were like, you are so dumb. We are berating him on the phone. Kim has him on speaker. We was like, you are dumb. They're going to give the clothes back. Why would they burn up his clothes? That's so stupid. Why would you knew he wanted a pinky ring. Like, we are just going off. And he does not budge. He was like, okay. So no, y'all are not getting my pinky ring. It was like, that's fine. Don't do anything for your cousin. We're snapping on him. And so when we get to the cremation area, because also the funeral director were like, well, most people don't come to the actual cremation. I was like, oh, well, guess what? I'll be there. I needed to be wherever he was. I would feel bad leaving the funeral home because I needed to be where he was. His viewing was, it was from 10 to like 7 till they closed. I stayed there all day because I needed to be there. I couldn't leave. And in hindsight, I don't know why I did that, but I just had to check to see, like, is he okay? But when the nice guy came over, we said a little prayer over his cremation casket. Another thing, you have to have a cremation casket. Anyway, we said a nice prayer over it. And, went on and did their thing. And the guy was like, hey, I just want to let you know his shoes were really nice. I put them in a bag and they're at the funeral home. And his cousin said, okay, great. Now, mind you, the machine is whirling. It's loud. And his cousin said, okay, great. And then what about his clothes? And the funeral director guy said,
like, no, those ones.
At that time, I looked up again, like, the wall started closing. I was like, oh God. Because I kept saying, oh, those socks are so nice. And my friend was like, you sure you don't want to just keep these socks? Well, this is a nice thing to keep of him. I was like, it's okay, we'll get them back. She was like, you're right.
Oh,
She's
no.
along with it too. Nobody stopped us to say, except for his cousin, nobody stopped to say, hey, you're not getting that back. We thought we were getting those things back. So he was like, and she said, his clothes, like he couldn't hear me. His clothes. He said, his clothes are on him.
They went with him.
And I looked at her, she looked at me, and I said, the damn socks. The socks.
Those were them. He wanted to keep those.
Why would you keep the socks? And so she was like, so you want me to ask him to push the casket out a little bit and open up the feet part? I was like, no. Please. So we get outside, me and his cousin, and his other cousin was there too. We just started laughing so hard at how dumb we were. It was like, what did we think? We was getting those socks back. And we just started having to come apart about the socks. His cousin was like, the socks ain't never did nothing to nobody. They deserve them. I was like, they did. I said, all the things to take from us. You take keys, you take the socks. I was like, God, why? What I do?
What else were you thinking?
We're in tears, laughing so hard. I was like, why would they take the socks? And so my friend had left that day, the one that was helping me. I get in the car and I call her. She was like, hey, how did everything go? I said, you're going to die. She was like, what happened? I said, they burned up the socks. She was like, what? I said, the socks are gone. They're gone. And apparently, they keep them fully dressed when they cremate them. And she was like, well, that makes sense.
Like when you think about it, you're like, yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Why would they undress? That makes sense. She was like, oh no. She said, well, at least you have the other 3 pair. I was like, I wanted the yellow ones.
I wanted the yellow ones.
I wanted the yellow socks. She was like, I'm so sorry. I'll buy you some more. I was like, I don't want those. I don't want those.
Oh,
but that was probably the funniest. We cackled about that. And I had to tell that story over and over because his cousin told us, and we still would not believe anything. And they called him after the cremation, and he was like, so? And they was like, they kept the clothes on. He was like, I know. Why did you say anything? He was like, I did. I told y'all. But it was the most hilarious, most heartbreaking thing ever. And I have a friend, I'll have to go get the photo, but she sent me a beautiful photo, almost in a shadow box with a yellow sock that has Kim's name on it. And it is the funniest thing I had ever seen. And everybody had commented on Facebook and Instagram was like, that's the funniest shit I've ever heard in my life. And most people were like, I didn't even think about that they cremate people with socks. I was like, it makes sense. I don't know why it didn't make sense at that time.
Why would we know? Like, this is
why wouldn't we know? I don't cremate people.
Learning on the go here. Like,
I don't know anything about this. So it definitely made a lot of sense. But it just, during that time, the adrenaline was so high that, you don't really experience that grief until everything starts to die down. Yeah. So as people slow down coming, and that's when I started to kind of sink. And so then I started to record my thoughts because, of course, with your own grief, I'm sure there's guilt, and the guilt most of the time doesn't make any sense.
It's the mind trying to make sense of the
something that doesn't make sense, right?
That doesn't make sense, yeah.
Because death doesn't make sense, right?
At all.
Death in itself.
I know I know this everything. I know everything goes through it, but I still don't understand it.
I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense because this person was living and breathing one moment, and now they're just not. I don't know how to, you can't process it. So I was guilting myself. I was like, I should have got up earlier. I should have got off the phone. I should have went to get him. It was so many, I should have done this. I should have done that. And I started to record and make sense of it, or try to make sense of it. And now during this whole time, I'm making jokes. Like, my friends were like, how are you funny? And I was like, it's autopilot. I don't know. That's the only way I know how to be.
It's probably a coping mechanism.
It's definitely coping, 100%. I can look at some of my old Grief is Ghetto videos now, and I can tell you 100% I'm not there. That's just that humor coming to the forefront to protect what was going on in the background, which was just
call it our avatar. It's like our representative shows up and we're just in the background.
Perfect. Yes, that is it. My avatar came to the front and I faded to the back. And I was able to do that because I wasn't there. When I look at those videos, I know I'm dead inside. Other people may not notice, but I know, because I never script any of this. I kind of write a topic that I want to talk about and I just talk, and then I just edit it. And I can look at that like, I don't remember any of this because I wasn't there.
Remember making the video. I hear you.
Remember. Yeah.
So much of your story resonates with my own, in the sense of the sudden loss, the walls caving in, the not knowing exactly what the process is for cremation and funerals and what do we do here. I just want to highlight how beautiful it is that your community, your friends, your family, your cousins all came together for you.
Absolutely.
They gave you the place that you deserve in Ken's life, because I've heard stories where even people who have married with kids, like their biological family will take over and leave them out of the equation. And I know that can be very difficult. And it just sounds like you had a beautiful community really supporting you, maybe imperfectly, but it also sounds like they got a lot of things right too.
Absolutely. 100%. They
shout out to every single one of them.
No, really
came through.
They were awesome. Because I think in my head, like, could I have done it? Could I have done that? Boy, they did it well too.
I will forever think of Ken when I see yellow socks. I will think of stories. We'll think of your beautiful love for him, because it sounds like you both individually, but also together, it sounds like you both had this beautiful energy everybody loved. And you could see that in the viewing. And it sounds like his spirit that came through in terms of like the funny aspects of it. And
absolutely.
I love that.
He shines, like, and that's a lot of people gave me like candles that said, his light shines, because he definitely was a light. That's another reason we had to have the memorial service outside, because with COVID regulations, we can have that. And it was almost maybe 200 people that came. I mean, his middle school classmates, elementary school teachers, people showed up, because he really was a beacon of light. He really was kind to people. He really was amazing. That was one of the things I struggled with too, when I was deep in my despair, because I was like, well, he's so much better than me. So why not me? I'm not always nice to people. I had a lot to work on. When I told you the wall where people get angry, and I learned that from Ken. He would say, "Oh, why you let those people in? You don't get that. You don't get that energy from me." When he passed on, somehow it finally clicked for me. Like, oh, this is what you meant. This is what he was so unbothered and absolutely funny, way funnier than me. And Ken was a heavy set guy, so he could joke. He was going to make a joke. He was like, if somebody jokes on me and they call me fat, they've already lost, because now I'm going to get you back. He was great at that. He never took life seriously in that way. And I think so many people were touched by him that, we had to do something, even though he didn't want that. We were like,
no, we have to. Sorry,
we have to. Yeah, look, I know you're mad, but we got to do what we got to do.
And let me ask you, so my brother was also cremated, and I couldn't make it to see him. Did that in some way give you closure? Is not the right word. How was that experience?
I will say it is not as traumatic as watching a burial. To me, a burial is so traumatic, because watching a coffin being lowered into the ground, God almighty. So that's where most people kind of break down. With my aunt, that's, everybody was like, oh, oof, oof, my God, it's awful. I won't say closure, but I said to the funeral director when we were planning this, I said, well, I'm going to the cremation because I have to see Ken through to the end. And she said,
that's beautiful.
Okay. And again, in that time, I had to be where he was, because also that guilt from not being where he was when things happen, I have to be where he was. So do I feel validated in doing that? Absolutely. Would I do it again? 100%. I'd do it 100 times because I needed to make sure to the very end that I saw him through. Now, there have been some times, like when my godfather passed, they had open casket, and my god sister, who's also my cousin, she was like, I don't want to look at him. And I was like, me either. I don't want to see him like that. And I made the mistake and looked. I regret that for the rest of my life. Because now, every time I see a coffin, I see him in it. I looked at Ken, I touched Ken, I didn't feel any of that. So I was very, and I still am very happy with his final services and his final goodbyes. I thought they were great, and I'm very happy with it. The cremation, like she said, most people don't. I mean, it's not anything formal. They literally bring the casket in and they, do what they're going to do.
Go, yeah.
Yeah, we just decided to do just a quick prayer. And it was almost like we needed to let him know we were there, even though,
right.
We needed to let him know we were there.
But I understand it's such a personal decision. It really, really is. I swore I would not do the open casket. I was not going to see him. I'm not going to be there. And then I ended up being there, seeing it and touching him and, all the things. And you just really don't know how you're going to react. You don't. But you really don't. You're meeting a new person in this context. And it's you. Like it's
yourself. Yes. It's so different for you too, because, and not trying to make the interview about you, but with your brother, that's somebody you've always known, that you've always known. So that makes it so different. It's almost like you don't want to see it, but your brain, in order to process it, you have to see it. And that's how it was with a lot of Ken's friends when we were like, well, he don't want to do a viewing, but so many people are like, please, I have to. So I get that. You can't believe sometimes until you actually see. So I think, it gave some people a lot of closure because he's the type of person that you think won't die. So right. I think they needed to see that and see him. And we needed to see him through the cremation and all of that. And it just, it made me feel good to do that. But like I said, there's still some times where I'm like, what could I have done that was different? But I also think that's that nasty guilt that gets a hold of you.
Right.
Like, hey, let's talk about
No, and it's so normal. It's so, I really do want to normalize that. The thoughts will be there years after too. Like there's always going to be that what if with. Mm-hmm. And then it's just a matter of learning to stand in your truth, and that changes with time, and you make peace with that in your own way. So I thank you so much for sharing it so vulnerably, openly, and authentically, because this is what helps guide other people who are maybe new on their journey or who maybe feel the guilt, but then resonate with your story, and also shows us that there could be that joy and laughter and the hilarity of the moment, even in the saddest goodbye.
100%.
So I absolutely love that. And I want to ask you 2 questions. I can't believe time is going by so quickly, but I'm loving your stories. I feel like this could be a whole series. Are you looking to write a book or do a series or anything like that, by the way? Because
I've been told to write a book, and I definitely am working on a book. And I have put my cousin in a note with me. I was like, please make sure I write every day. So if I don't write, she'll be like, hey, I hadn't seen that note. Update on my phone, what you doing? And I wanna do it to where it's not sad, because even Grief is Ghetto is not sad. I have to remind people that this is a raw account of the things that I feel, right, and the things that I've experienced that I don't hear a lot of people talk about. And it's, like you said, normalizing some of the things that aren't in those 5 stages, because those 5 stages are BS. Like there are way more, and they don't go in order. No, they do. It's a roller coaster. So I created it for it to be an outlet for other people. There are some times where that becomes a burden, because when I talk about it, I have to live it. So sometimes when I talk about things, I can rip out 3 or 4 videos, and then I have to sit, or sometimes I'll have a little panic, or so there will be gaps sometimes in those videos, because it sometimes will take me to a darker place. But I'm learning now, what is 3 years later, to kind of filter it. It doesn't have to be sad, because somebody's going to see this and they're going to be like, oh my God, thank you. This is going to be a relief for them. So don't look at it that way. So I'm getting better with filtering out what makes it difficult and, making it more of an experience, a beacon of light for the next person, not just me. So it's been a journey.
It's definitely a beacon of light. And also those breaks I found are authentic to the experience. They are actually what grief is. Same here. Sometimes I create content and then I'm like, okay, that's enough for, I don't know, the next month. I don't know.
Yes.
So now it's too much. So I hear you and I see you. And I want to ask you two things. One, what does your relationship with Ken look like now? How would you define it, or what words could you attribute to it? And then two, what does grief is ghetto mean? Like, what is your personal definition of that concept in your brand?
So my relationship with Ken is, if I have to give it one word, it's the blueprint. It's the blueprint for how I should live my life. It's the blueprint for future and, current relationships. I am dating. I am in another relationship that is still fairly new, but I learned so many things with Ken that I'm able to bring into this that are so helpful. It really is the blueprint for probably the rest of my life, not just our relationship, but Ken in general, the way Ken lived his life, the way his family, because his family's great, the way they are supportive. Like, my family's great, but their family, there's such a host of cousins that just, when something happens, they drop everything. And it was such an abundance of love there. So that's a blueprint of what I want to be, a part of. I want to have a family that's just like that. So it's the blueprint. That's the word I would give it for how to live my life moving forward. Grief is ghetto. I think somebody asked me this. They were rude about it, but they were like, what did that got to do with grief?
No, I just feel like there's always a meaning we give to the words that we choose. Like, to me, light in grief and light means something different as my grief evolves.
100%.
And I used to define it one way, and now it's something totally different. And I don't have one answer. It's just like what it means today. So I'm curious if there's an element of that. And also, I love what you just said about the blueprint. Wow, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
That was off the top of the head. I got it.
Really beautiful. Yeah, write that one down. Wow. I am like teary-eyed. Yeah, you say that.
I reference Ken in most things that I do. It's almost like, you remember the WWJD brace, what would Jesus do? I have like, what would Ken do in this situation? How would Ken handle this? How would Ken say that? It's very much the blueprint for my life. But grief is ghetto. So ghetto to me is chaotic, right? When we describe something as ghetto, it almost is like, it doesn't quite make sense. It's a little chaos. It's a little weird. You don't know what you're going to get next. That's how I define it. And that's how I define grief. It's chaotic. It's a beautiful thing. I think maybe, was it Taraji or Regina King? One of them said, it's love with no place to go. The final act of love for someone. It's so many things in one. It's despair. It's happiness. It's laughter. It's tears. It's, it means so much that I thought ghetto was the appropriate word to give it. Plus, every time my friends and I are not big. We're not the friend group that just is going to cry. We're not big criers. And literally, unless someone dies. But there were moments where we would be sitting and we'll take a shot and we'll look at each other, and like one of my male friends be like, oh shit. We're starting to cry. It's ghetto.
Yeah.
It's ghetto, because how do we take a shot and then be like, all right, I'm about to cry?
Right.
So it's all over the place. And I describe it as that. And still, it still is. It, like you said, it changes from time to time. I can confidently say now, even the sad moments turn into laughter. And then there are some times where they're just sad. Grief in itself is just a whirlwind of emotion, not just yours, but everybody else's as well. And everything that comes with loving, experiencing that person, and then experiencing their passing is ghetto. You go from planning birthday dinners and birthday parties. And for Ken and I, we were planning trips, and we were like, okay, let's, we're going to get married. We're going to, we're planning all of this to me planning his funeral. It is a journey with 68,000 turns. And you don't know which one to go, and you just pick a road and you go down and then you just keep going. It's
8,000 turns of a minute.
Yes. It's a maze of emotion. And I just think that was the term that stuck with me, because every time something would happen, I'm like, oh, this is ghetto. This is okay. You left the funeral home. I was like, ghetto. This is ghetto. It's just how I thought, would be perfect to define it. But it definitely is light as well. And that's why when I saw your podcast, I was like, oh, I love that. I love grief and light, because grief can be so dark. So to give it like, hey, there's light as well, that resonated to me, because Ken and I had a conversation. He had gotten very, very down about some health issues he was having. And I was actually fussing at him. And I was like, well, you just quit. I said, and that's the thing that you tell me not to do. And he was like, I just feel like I'm in a tunnel and I can't get out. And I said, well, tunnels end, right? I said, so you keep walking till you get to the end of the tunnel where you see the light. There's light there. I see you're not stuck. You just stopped walking. And that light, every time I think of grief, I'm like, okay, light, joy, light. I love you use that, because
your knowledge is beautiful too.
Light was my best friend and still is. Like, even in my grief, I wouldn't sleep at night, and I would sit and just look out the window and wait for the sun, because I'm like, okay, it'll be light. Where's the light? And when I would see the daybreak, I'm like, okay. And I could breathe and I could get 2 or 3 hours of sleep. Then I had to go to work, but I would look for the light. For my biblical people, it says, joy comes in the morning. So I'm looking for light. I'm looking for the joy, because when I can see the light, I can feel something other than sadness, So it was a big deal. I used to keep all the lights on in my house. I would not let it be dark, because even though it may not seem like it, just using the word light, it has been such a big staple in my life and in my grief journey, because I need the light. I need to see the light. When my aunt passed, it was the same thing. I didn't get into as much despair as when Ken passed, only because my aunt's passing was beautiful. It was painless. She literally went to sleep. She was at home. She was sick.
Kind of like
she was older. She was suffering. It was very ideal. I want to go that way. It was very ideal. The grief for my aunt was because, almost like your brother, I had never known a life without my aunt. My aunt raised me since I was a baby. So now what? I don't know a life where she's not in it. So I went back to, okay, light. And sometimes I would sit and just say that. I would look out the window and just wait for the sun to come up. It became almost a job, okay, look for the light, look for the light, look for the, and that, it can get really hard in the winter months. That's when I started to get them down, but I'm like, just get as much light as you can, so I would describe ghetto as that. It's chaotic. It's so many things that it's ghetto.
I love it. And one aspect of it that I really enjoy is because when you say there really are no words for this experience, it's really so surreal that you're just sitting there to yourself staring into nothingness. You're like, this is ghetto. Like, this is crazy.
This is ghetto.
What is happening?
Yes.
And also there's like that element of humor that is so such a common thread between you and Ken and what you're doing now. And I love hearing that your relationship with him was such a blueprint, and he lives on in so much of this. We're still talking about him. We're still talking about his beautiful spirit. And you get to have these new relationships with the love that you know to be so true. And that has become, I'm guessing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that could probably be kind of the base for your next relationship, because you've already had this, you know how good it can be. And that is the base. Not that we compare people, but there's a core experience, and that defines us. That defines who we are. So I absolutely love that. Where can people find your information and buy some of your merchandise? I know that you have some amazing products on your website. So tell us.
I do. I don't push it, because I try to tell people Grief is Ghetto is not a store. I only put out the merchandise because people ask, like, do you have t-shirts? I was like, okay, I guess I'll make t-shirts. And shout out to my t-shirt girl, Lauren Blue. She does my t-shirts. She does, when I was coaching, she did all the stuff, my t-shirts and stuff for my girls. And she actually created the logo for Grief is Ghetto. And once I texted her and told her, I was like, Lauren, I need to do Grief is Ghetto t-shirt. She was like, okay, I'm going to look at some, some logos. And she created it and did a beautiful job. But you can go to my website at charniahwilson.com, literally my name, because, that domain was available. Hilariously enough, nobody had it. So you can go there to purchase merchandise. I was doing like a monthly thing, and then again, never wanted to be a store owner, never wanted to be a boutique owner. So I was like, this is exhausting. I just want to make content. I just want to make content. But you can purchase on there. Some shirts I do have up on the website. I'll probably swap them out for spring and all of that. But you can go there. You can visit my TikTok, and it's just Charniah Wilson, and you'll see all the Grief is Ghetto content there. You'll also see some of my other things, Shaw's Random Thoughts, which actually came from Ken. Ken used to do Ken's Random Thoughts on Facebook, and I was like, well, and I would help him come up with stuff. He'd be like, what should I say for Ken's Random Thoughts? And so I thought that was a nice way to remember him as well. So I do those. And you can also go to my Instagram, which is cwilson_06. And that will give you some content there as well. Some people DM me and they ask me questions. I just have to remind people, not a therapist, not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. All I can do is kind of tell you my experience and, I'll try to uplift from there. But, people will DM and ask questions, and I'm absolutely open to them. I appreciate that. And please watch it. Please get what you want from it. If you even have a topic that maybe I haven't discussed that you want to see, like, hey, is this happening to you? Because I've had some people say, hey, this has happened. But and I'm like, oh, that's good. Or I didn't even realize that had happened. I'm like, let me write that down. That's good right there. So yes, please tell me if there's something that you kind of want me to cover that you don't see. So you can reach me on those 3 platforms.
I will definitely link that. And I love your videos. One of them that stood out was the text me when you get there. Like if I call you and ask you if you got home, like, you better text me. And it's so serious, especially after sudden loss, especially because you were texting Ken and he didn't answer. So Correct. It's not a joke, people. After somebody, text us back, please. Please say made it, please. It's so serious now. And it used to really just be, it's almost like when you come into a room or when you've seen somebody, you're like, oh, how you doing? You don't care how they're doing. Most of the time you don't care. And that's how it was before. Oh, text me when you make it home. But now it's like, no. Did you make it? Because I need to know. Like, I need to know that you got text me back, right?
Please. Yeah. Please tell me. And the great thing now, and I don't know if this was a thing back then, but the sharing location. So like my close friends, we do share locations. There's some, we have the Life 360, and we can kind of see. You forgot to text me, but you may at least see that. But it's a huge deal now. And I tell people Ken's last words were, I'm on the way. Never got here, so I just need that. Put my soul at peace by telling me.
For my heart and spirit. Yeah, please. So definitely, your videos are very relatable. And I think humor is such a connecting factor. So it's a perfect medium. I love the topic. I love the way that you express yourself, that you share this reality, the truth, and you connect with other people. And you're doing an amazing job. You're speaking of light. You are a light in the space and are helping so many. And I know you'll continue to do so. So thank you for everything you're doing. For growing up as yourself and, and being the beautiful person that you are inside out. And I want to give you some time to maybe share something that's in your heart that we didn't cover, something that I didn't ask, something that you want to share about your grief experience, anything that comes to mind, something that you want to leave the listeners with.
I try to say this in every podcast, but my friend Reggie, the band director who left his kid, he was kind of he was my go-to buddy when I would start to kind of panic. And the one thing he would always say was, hey, you can cry and you can scream, but you have to breathe. I'm okay with everything else. Just breathe. I try to remind people that it's such a small and simple gesture, but when you become overwhelmed, sometimes you forget to just breathe, like just breathe. So even now when I'm if I feel myself getting ready to have a come apart or a panic attack, I will literally breathe in and I will breathe out and say, And I can feel the calm coming just from doing that, just from saying breathe and just breathe. And I'll do it as many times as I need to until I feel myself come, back down. And by the time I come down, now I'm thinking of something funny and now I'm laughing. Just remember to breathe in the most overwhelming moments. Just stop, take a break, go outside. I just had a coworker experience a big loss too, and she was like, sometimes I'm sitting at the desk and I was like, hey, take a break, go in the back, just breathe. And now she's doing it. I was like, don't feel like you can't say, hey, 1 second. You can take 1 second and just go breathe. And I've done it even in front of people. Like with one time, me and my boss were talking and he mentioned something. It was the word that triggered a memory of Ken that then triggered my, tears started coming. I said, hold on. He was like, what's going on? Shh. And when I asked him to stop talking, I appreciate him. He was just like, okay, whatever I need to do. And it helps so much. So that's the biggest thing I can leave everybody with is really just remember to breathe. And it sounds cliche as hell, but people will tell me 1 day at a time. But I'm going to take it further. It's 1 moment at a time, 1 second at a time, 1 minute at a time. Just because you might have had an anxiety, or a come apart at 8 o'clock or 8 a.m. doesn't mean the rest of your day is done. Sit in that, take a minute, breathe, and then go with the rest of your day. So every day doesn't have to be the same. Every moment won't be the same. But sit in that moment when you feel that grief. Sit in it, feel it, let it come, tears, and then breathe, and okay. Next moment, we just have to, that's all grief is preparing for the next moment. And I want people to remember that because that's something I learned a lot while grieving, that it just changes from minute to minute. So take that moment, do what you have to do, and then come back and like, okay, next moment.
Beautifully said. And I completely agree. Breathing is all the things, especially in grief. And then as a final question, what would Shaw today tell Shaw in 2021 after Ken's passing?
Woof. Well, she would listen. And when I was sober, because I was sober a lot, but it's not the end. I probably would tell myself that over because it felt like the end. It really felt like the end. There is no way that I'm going to move forward. There's no way I'm going to date again. There's no way I'm going to love again. There's no way, that's what I felt. But that is the grief lying to you. It's not the end. I would again say, take it 1 moment at a time. It's not the end. It's not the end. You will get better. We don't get past the grief. We just grow around it, right? So it continues to be a part of our life, but we learn to grow around it and manage it. And I would tell myself, there is light. You're going to see it. Just keep going. There were times where the despair would be so bad that, I would think not so great thoughts. And I would want to do not so great things that could have ended my life, because that I did not feel like there was, it's that tunnel. It's nothing. And I would just continue to tell myself like, no. It gets better. It gets better. I tell people that who DM me and I'm like, I know this is going to sound dumb, but I promise it gets better. I promise it gets better. And I hope that that's helpful for them. I know, you don't listen in the moment. You're like, please, this is going to be weird for the rest of my life. But it does get better. It really does.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Shaw. It has been an honor and a privilege to talk to you, share your story, hear about Ken, and share your work with our audience. So thank you for being you, and thank you for being generous with your time.
Oh, really. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That's it for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Grief and Light podcast. I'd also love to connect with you and hear your thoughts and your stories. Feel free to share them with me via my Instagram page at Grief and Light, or you can also visit griefandlight.com for more information and updates. Thank you so much for being here, for being you, and always remember, you are not alone.